Hello everyone and welcome to this April bullet journal plan with me video. This time we're gonna set up this very light and romantic monthly layout which is inspired by the Rococo art style. I had so much fun with this theme and I hope you'll fall in love with this style as much as I did. But now let's get started with the first spread, and this will be a cover and monthly calendar combination. I feel like I always spend so much time on these two pages, so to speed things up a little bit this month, I decided to combine them and leave a little bit more time for the rest of the pages too. But anyway, as you can see, we're gonna start by sketching this right page here where I wanted to create this oval shaped flower decoration. I don't know if this thing is a mirror or what, but what I wanted was to draw a pretty frame and some swirls to decorate the flower that's going on to the middle. I absolutely love scrolling through pictures of these swirl decorations, and in the Rococo era, there were a lot of these swirl and floral decorations in the architecture as well as in the clothes and other types of designs. Also, all the colors seem to be a little bit more light and fun in this era, which was perfect for this spring theme. I felt that it was easier to start things off with the pencil sketch, so you can really take your time with the design and make sure that the swirls and everything are as even and symmetrical as possible. This is definitely the type of drawing style where you could spend limitless time on each of these designs and just keep adding small details everywhere. So if you feel like you don't have enough time to complete a full layout in this style before the month begins, maybe you could instead have one page with a bigger decoration that would be some sort of ongoing drawing project throughout the whole month. I find drawing these types of small symmetrical decorations very fun and therapeutic in a way, and hopefully it could be that for some of you too if you need it. But after this step, I finally took out some gouache paints that we're gonna use to color this whole illustration. I wasn't completely sure what colors I wanted to use for the rest of the page at this point, so because of that I chose to go with pretty neutral colors for this one, just so it will pretty much go with anything else later. So I mixed this light beige tone, which actually looked a lot more yellow against my notebook paper. It was kind of my problem this whole month because my notebook paper has a very cool tone, white tone, so almost all colors are gonna look a little bit more yellow against it. But after we have this whole picture ready, the color will look much more subtle, so it was all okay. But after I was somewhat happy with this sketch, I decided to go it over with a thin black pen, and I did actually go over pretty much all of this with paints, but having the black definitely adds a little bit more definition to the drawing nevertheless. What I love the most about gouache paints is that you can go over the lower color layers completely. So what really works with these paints is to start with some darker layers and then add the lighter highlight layers on top. I think adding some white details to the highest points definitely suited this frame decoration and made some of these details pop a little bit better. We're gonna use this technique a lot in this theme, so I think you will definitely get a good idea of how you can use gouache paints this way. But after we're pretty much done with the frame, it's time to paint the flower thingy in the middle. I sketched these out a little bit too to figure out a somewhat balanced combination of some leaves, then a few bigger flowers and some smaller flowers as well. You definitely don't need to get stuck on any small details with this style, which honestly makes it so fun and fast to paint. So pretty much any plop of color will end up looking like a flower if you add some shadows to it and then frame it with some combination of leaves. This time I also didn't use the black pen for the outlines to keep the flowers looking slightly softer. So we're just gonna go right in with the gouache paints and make sure that we use enough paints to cover all the background colors. If you ever feel like you can't really cover the background layer, it probably means that you're using too much water with your gouache paints. I came to gouache from normal watercolors, so the amount of paint you need to use can be a little bit surprising at first, so you definitely need to use more with gouache to get that smooth, opaque finish. I tried to go pretty dark with the shadows, which really brought everything together in my opinion. So you can see how I tried adding some thin, dark lines to the flowers, and then also add some of these super dark green leaves closer to the middle of this arrangement. And then the colors are getting lighter when you move towards the edges. But after that, we're finally done with this first little painting. And now let's start working with the rest of this spread. So I knew I wanted to have some color or pattern behind this decoration and create this small Dutch door page setup. But I didn't really want to start drawing a very repeated pattern because I created this whole theme in a little bit of hurry and I didn't have much time to film. So I'm actually gonna show you how to create a very simple, easy pattern design by just drawing a few elements on a paper and then finishing all of the rest on a computer. I know this is not something I often do in my videos, but I really wanted to show this step to you anyway because I think some of you might find it interesting. And we are also going to create a little bit smaller pattern a little bit later on in this setup. So I hope you will get the idea of how to do this both ways. So I took out a separate sketchbook for this and started by drawing this long swirl pattern. It doesn't have to be perfect in this point or anything because we'll draw it over on a computer and smooth everything out. The reason I wanted to do this by hand is that for me it's often easier to start the drawing on a paper and at least have some outlines in place that I can then finalize digitally. But anyway, believe it or not, this will be all we need for the whole swirl part of the pattern. And then I wanted there to be this small flower arrangement that we can also repeat throughout the whole thing. So I painted this very quick set of flowers and leaves in very similar style that we used on the previous frame drawing. And after this was ready, I took a picture of both of these on my phone and sent it to my computer. I open up this picture on Photoshop and the first thing I usually do is to fix some of the colors and brightness a little bit. I usually use scanner to get the pictures on my computer, but this drawing was so small that I didn't bother taking it out. But now you can see how I started to go over the swirl thing, which is true. If you use Photoshop or Procreate, I highly recommend learning how to use the smoothing function in your brushes for things like this, because it helps so much to remove any shakiness and makes creating any type of line work much easier. I also added this second layer to this with a different color just to make it stand out against the background a little bit better. Then you can try playing around with different colors, maybe adding a background shadow and so on. And I recommend doing all of this to the first shape before we start duplicating anything. I also made some small fixes to the flower thingy and intensified some of the colors. But after I was happy with everything here, I just copied the swirl decoration to the other side of the flower. And now this is the thing that we'll use to copy and cover the whole page with. I ended up adding these lighter stripes to the background and also fixed the sizes of the pattern a little bit. But basically, this is how you're able to create a very simple pattern like this on a computer. Once I had everything done, I printed this pattern out on my new Japanese washi paper, which is my new favorite thing. I used this on some new products of my shop and honestly I love it so much, but you could definitely print this on any regular copy paper or sticker paper and just call it a day. And I guess it would now be a good time to mention that my new shop has finally opened again. There are so many new products to choose from, and I actually think that I'll create a small mini collection from this Rococo style too, but it will still take me maybe 2 weeks to finish. But meanwhile, the new spring collection is available, and actually the collection boxes and spring washi tapes are already almost gone. So if you're interested in those, be sure to get yours before they run out. Thank you guys so much for all the love and support you've shown for the new shop. I'm very, very grateful for that, and I really hope you'll enjoy using the new products. But anyway, that's it about the advertisement for this time. And now that we have the pattern in place, I decided to finish this cover with the monthly title and a small calendar. I wanted to try out this little bit old school cursive font for the titles this month because I think it suited the style of the theme very well. I feel like the key to this font was definitely making the downstrokes of the letters thicker. And if you can't use a real calligraphy pen like me, you can achieve the same appearance by just drawing the downstrokes with the same pen you're using. Then I wanted to use this light baby pink Tombow brush pen, and I also added this small dot line under the weekday titles. I think overall the cover spread ended up looking so cute, but I feel like this style might divide people quite a lot. There's definitely a fine line between this having the beautiful Rococo vibe or to be something you remember from your grandparents' bathroom. But anyway, before we move on, let's quickly set up the monthly calendar here in the inside of the Dutch store. So nothing special here, I just wrote this very simple calendar to the top and then left the bottom part for any random notes I might have throughout the month. Whenever I don't really have any special idea for a part of the page, I usually turn them into these notes sections because these usually will be helpful sooner or later. There's also this a little bit awkward empty white space on the left side, but I decided to leave it empty for now and I think I might add a sticker or something to that later. But yeah, that's it for the whole first spread here, and now we can finally move on to some planning stuff. April will be the first month in the second quarter of the year, so this next whole spread here will be for the second quarter planning. But before we start setting up the page itself, I actually wanted to create this long horizontal gouache painting here first. I decided to paint this on a piece of watercolor paper, and I want to show some of these Rococo style paintings I used as my inspiration for this style we're going for. This is gonna be some sort of garden painting with a lot of trees in the background and then some flowers more up front. One thing that I really tried to focus on here was to start with very dark colors and then build up lighter details on top. I feel like I often struggle to go dark enough with the background layers, maybe because going in with a super dark color seems a little bit scary at first, and that's something you never want to do with watercolor paintings, so I feel like my brain just doesn't want to do that. But anyway, this time you can see how I started with this super dark green and only left out some of these areas that will be for the bigger details of the painting. I did some sketching for this one too, but the sketches looked so messy that I could barely understand them myself, so I thought it wasn't necessary to show that part in the video. Anyway, I wanted this center part of the painting to have this opening between the trees. So we're gonna add some light blue here to resemble the sky in the background. But after these very messy background layers, I decided to start building the details starting from this left corner. I wanted there to be some sort of flower vase, so we are drawing that first and then starting to add the leaves on top and also around it. All the nature elements in this picture, so the leaves, flowers and so on, are just drawn with these tapping motions, so it's actually much easier to create a painting like this than it might look once it's all done. I think this one took me maybe 2 hours in real life, which is really not that bad. And I really feel like this was one of those paintings that unlocked something for me. It somehow felt much easier to paint than some of the paintings like this that I've created in the past. And I think it was definitely thanks to the color order and building the lighter colors on top of the darker ones that worked very well for this style. I also tried to keep the paints pretty thick here, and I was switching between a few different brush sizes depending on what part of the painting I was working on. I drew some more bigger flowers on the right side of the painting, and they are hanging around this pillar or something. I don't really know what's going on here in the right side, to be honest. But anyway, I think having a pretty strong contrast between the dark and light areas in this painting made it look much nicer. And I think especially going light enough with the middle section really worked for this painting somehow. I know I'm going this over pretty fast, but as I said, the whole thing is just me slowly tapping on different color layers, so there's really no special techniques needed, just patience and time. But after I was done adding the last small details, I removed the washi tapes around the painting and glued it to my notebook in 2 pieces. I feel like this painting was definitely quite overpowering on this spread, so I struggled a little bit to put the rest of the spread together. However, we're gonna start by writing this focus title in the bottom corner. And this section will just be for me to list some of the most important goals or things I'd like to achieve on the second quarter of the year. I think I've said this before in the videos, but I feel like the 3-month cycle is such a good timeline for setting goals in my opinion. 1 month can often go by pretty fast, and I think starting any new bigger thing might take longer than that anyway. So I usually try to take the beginning of a new quarter as a good time to look back to my yearly goals and see what could be something I could take on my plate for the next 3 months. I painted some quick floral swirls in the corners before we continue with the next page, just because I thought the title looked a little bit lonely up there. I used the same gouache paints throughout the whole month, and the good thing about them is that you can easily reactivate the paints even though they have already dried on your palette by mixing a little bit of water with them. I usually only add fresh paints on top of the old ones in case I want to paint very large area with the same color. But any small details can easily be painted with the old leftovers you still have on your painting palette. But then I added 2 more sections here, so the first one will be a short goal check, which is for looking back on the yearly goals as I was talking about. And then I also added this problems section in case I feel like there's something I couldn't quite start or figure out yet. I felt like this page looked a little bit empty like this, so I actually decided to use these thin slices of the same blue pattern we created earlier and add it to the sides of the pages. However, I did decide to create this simple laced border here as well, so I'm actually adding the second blue stripe on the next spread instead of this one, and then the lace pattern will also show on both of these spreads. I just used scissors for this and then colored the edge of the lace pattern with the same brush pen we've used on some of the other details. But after that, the second quarter planning spread is ready to go, and now let's flip over to the next spread, which will also be for some monthly planning. So here we'll actually start with the second pattern design that I wanted for this theme. So first, to get clean edges to this area, I used washi tapes as the painting borders. I wanted the colors in this one to be a little bit softer and more neutral. So I actually ended up mixing some blue to the color I tried using first, because I felt like the first layer was a little bit too yellow again. I wanted to create kind of similar vertical stripe design as we did earlier. So after this first paint layer had fully dried, I moved the washi tapes a little bit and painted these lighter stripes on top of the first layer. Anyways, after we have these stripes going on here, I started to paint some flowers on top of them. I wanted this to look like one of those repeated designs again, so I first sketched out the placements for all of these shapes and then started to paint them by adding one element at a time to all of these designs. I feel like this was a little bit faster way than going back and forth with the colors and finishing one small flower pattern at a time. And again, I used very similar style flowers as we did before, so no black outlines and also pretty messy details. And even though these shapes are technically supposed to be identical, I think it's enough if they have the main shapes in common. In the end, I did end up liking this pattern on its own, but I don't know if it really suited this spread. I think it looked a little bit weird here, and the lace pattern didn't really work with it super well either. But we're just rolling with it and trying to fix the situation by finishing the rest of the spread. So as I mentioned, this spread will be more for setting the focus for the upcoming month. So I started by making this simple list for some things that are the priority, and then another list for all the secondary things that can be moved on if necessary. It's been very helpful for me to set these monthly planning sections, and I usually fill these in the beginning of the month, so it kind of works as my overall plan for the whole month ahead. Sometimes the goals are pretty clear, but I'm definitely the type of person who comes up with too many new projects if I don't set my mind on something, and I just lose the track of time and focus pretty easily. So that's why having the small planning session in the beginning of the month is really helpful. I also decided to try out a very simple habit tracker here in the lower part of the page. So here there are 30 boxes for each of these 3 habits, and I will just simply draw a circle or something here when I complete the habit, and I won't bother tracking this by day or anything like that. I've been struggling to stay consistent with my routines a little bit recently because I had way too much work to do in March that kind of messed up all my routines. So these habit trackers are something I'll try to use to get back on track again and maybe try to fix my work-life balance a little bit. I also used this whole second page to make a plan to fix my time management issues. Because as I said, March was super busy month for me with the shop launch and everything, and I think I could have avoided it by planning the whole thing a little bit better. So yeah, that's what this page is gonna be for me, but I think this same layout could be used for pretty much any other problem you might have. So as always, feel free to change things up and edit anything for your own needs. But now we still have this one empty corner here that I decided to fill with this fan illustration. So these beautiful fans were also something I came across when looking for inspiration for the Rococo style. And I thought it was a nice, simple element we could use for this corner here. I think you're probably pretty familiar with the different drawing steps by now, so we're gonna go over this drawing a little bit faster. So after having some quick pencil sketches, I decided to define some of the outlines with a black pen this time, and then we're using the same gouache paints to do all the coloring work. I think these neutral colors can look so ugly in the beginning stages of the painting, so don't be discouraged by the ugly face and just push through it. I think after I started to add the more colorful details on top, everything started to slowly come together. So again, we are using some very messy swirl decorations and some flowers. And then I feel like adding some dots and sparkle is usually a good idea to do in the end. But that's finally it for the April planning section. And now let's flip over to set up the last bigger section of this month, which will be for the weekly planning. I wanted to use a Dutch door setup here again. So we're gonna start by cutting all of these next few pages. So we have this almost booklet thing in the middle of the whole page. I also rounded the corners of these with my handy corner rounding tool, but after these are done, we can start creating the decorations to the top part of the page. So I definitely wanted to finish this theme with a bigger flower and swirl ornament thing again. So I started by sketching everything out, and I definitely tried to make this one a little bit more detailed. After we have the sketch in place, I started by again using my gouache paints for the coloring. And I started with this bigger middle piece here where there are some bigger flowers and leaves. I was actually struggling with these flowers so much, and finally I kinda ended up giving up on them. I was seriously running out of time in this point, so not getting the flowers right made me very frustrated. And I feel like me being frustrated was probably the reason they didn't work out in the end. But anyway, again, this is one of those things where you can just take your time and add as many small details everywhere as you want. I tried to change up the color intensity, so some of these leaves and flowers will be much lighter, and then the ones that are darker will also catch your eye a little bit better. So thinking about that might help you to balance out the whole decoration. I also think I accidentally deleted some of the footage from this last page, so there were a few points where I had to jump a little bit in the video, so I'm very sorry for that. But after the top pattern was done, I ended up adding these side stripes again, because I just feel like this same pattern went with pretty much all the decorations this month. And then we can finally set up the first simple weekly layout. As I mentioned, I've struggled with my routines a little bit, so I felt like going back to the basics will probably help me out the most. So I will have a little bit room for each day to write a daily to-do list if I feel like it will be helpful for me. And then I also have this top priorities section in the bottom part of the layout. I only set up the first weekly layout for now, but I will probably use something very similar for the rest of the weeks as well. And then let's flip to this last page on this spread, which I will use to write out a very simple reflection page for the whole month. So I decided to include this one in this same Dutch door layout, and I decided to try out something a little bit different here too. So I will use this left side to write a small reflection after each week. Usually I use these pages to write out something in the end of the month, but I thought since I'm trying to get back to my routines a little bit, updating my bullet journal on a regular basis usually helps me to do that. So I hope I will keep up with these short weekly reflections. But then the next page will be very simple. So first I have some room to write about things that are in my mind at the moment. And then I can also list some of my favorite things from the whole month. But that finally finishes up our April Rococo style monthly layout. I will add something to the lower part of the weekly section as well, but I just didn't have time to do that for this video. I think it will be a very similar swirl pattern than in the top. So if you want to add something in there, maybe you can use the same one as your inspiration. But other than that, I really hope you enjoyed these springy colors and romantic floral decorations. If this was your first time around here and you want to stay tuned for more journaling and art stuff in the future, definitely consider subscribing. But other than that, I guess that's it for this time. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you're having an amazing day or night wherever you are, and see you in my next one. Bye bye!